the concept of base level of erosion. Now, base level of erosion, primarily, what is the idea? So base level of erosion was introduced by Powell, okay, in 1875. Primarily, base level of erosion represents the maximum vertical extent up to which a river can cut. So when the river is flowing, okay, how deep it can cut, and it will keep cutting. So how deeper it can get, how much is the maximum vertical limit of the cutting, that has been called as the base level. So in this case, primarily, when Powell talks about the base level, what he says, so the concept was given by Powell, 1875. He calls this as the maximum vertical extent or maximum vertical limit of the cutting or down cutting by the river. Now, as Powell defines or explains the base level concept, he comes up primarily with the three concepts. Okay, there was this one definition, but later Davis, when interpreting the concept given by the Powell, comes up with the idea that Powell's explanation or description of base level has three basic characteristics. Now, what are these three characteristics? First, when Powell says that base level, which he calls as the grand base level, which he calls as sea level. So according to him, grand base level is nothing but the sea level. So with respect to understanding this idea of grand base level to be the sea level, now what can be seen over here is, let's say, the river looks like this, the long profile of the river looks like this, and this is the sea level. Now, eventually what the river is going to do is is going to erode these parts. So let's say from here, the river erodes this whole portion to become something like this. Now he says that this is the grand base level. And so river cannot cut beyond this. So in no case, you may find that the next level of erosion happens like this and then happens like this. This is not allowed. This is what we are calling as the maximum limits of vertical erosion. That in no case a river is going to cut below the base level. So base level is going to determine it. And so first thing that he identifies is the grand base level that acts as a ultimate base level or permanent base level for almost every river. And so according to him, what should happen now is going beyond this. If I take it out, because this is not a possibility, according to him, what should happen? Further, the erosion should happen like this. Further, the erosion should happen like this, but not going beyond this. Further, the erosion should be happening like this. And what is this? This was the source part, which lies on the higher mountains. So mountain is being worn down. Wearing down of the mountain is taking place. Ultimately, everything has to be planed. Okay, and that has to come at the sea level. So first idea that Powell talks about and how Davis interprets it is where Powell was talking about a grand base level, which would act as the ultimate base level for every river, okay, flowing. That's the first case. Secondly, what Powell says is this base level is going to be an imaginary surface and would not be perfectly horizontal. Okay, rather slightly inclined. Slightly inclined because anyways the river has to reach here. Now, if you see in this case or this case or this case, it's almost impossible for the river to reach here. Why so? Because it has already reached the sea level here only. From here, how will it flow if there is no gradient available? So there has to be a gradient availability. For this, there has to be a gradient availability. So in this case, flowing along the plane would not be possible. So if I take this particular idea, what can be said is, rather than base level to be like this, if this is the sea level, over here, if this is the sea level, our plane, that would be the base level, okay, that should be slightly inclined, and that should extend something like this. So it is slightly inclined. And now you can figure out how the rivers are going to flow. River 1 going to flow over here. Then erosion happened. River reaches here, but still you have a slope towards the sea. So it is still going to flow. Similarly, the river reaching over here, let it reach here. Even reaching here, it's not a plane surface, it's inclined. So still it is going to reach the sea. So in this case, the second contention of Davis with respect to interpretation of Powell is that the base level is imaginary and base level is slightly inclined. So that is the second contention of Davis. And the third contention, where when Powell was describing this concept of base level, he came up with the idea of local base levels, local and temporary base levels. That is, he says that, okay, for all the rivers on the earth, definitely sea level is going to be the ultimate base level or grand base level. But locally, there would be checks. And these checks would prove to be the local base levels, beyond which the river is not going to cut. So let's say, for example, now in this case, we take one scenario, which is the hard rock. So there was this long profile of the river. And in this case, let's say we find a intrusion, that is a dike intrusion. Now this dike intrusion which would be there, this dike intrusion is going to be a hard rock intrusion. So say over here you have a dike intrusion like this. Now with this dike intrusion, when the erosion is going to happen, this would determine the base level, new base level locally for the part of the river which is above it. And what is the rule now? The rule is that river cannot cut below the base level. So in this case, whatever may be the erosion, okay, this erosion is never going to come up to here. And applying the second idea of Powell, that is, it has to be an inclined plane. Okay, I can take the base level something to be like this, let's say. And so in this case, now when the erosion is going to happen, erosion can happen over here and flowing like this. Erosion can happen and flowing like this. Now it's inclined, so it is going to flow, no doubt in that. Okay, and so it flows like this. But in any case, you can see it is not going to cut below it. So this is one case which can be called as local or temporary base level. That's the case. Or another case, that the description from Powell that we see, another case is the local lakes to which the river may be flowing. So in this case itself, let's say a river is flowing into this lake. And then from here it is flowing further. So this lake also would act as a local or temporary base level. Okay, and exactly the same, what was happening over here would be where I'll get a inclined base level over here. And again, for this, what is it saying? That the river above it, not below it, the river above it would not be able to downcut below this base level. So this becomes the idea of temporary and local base levels. So this was the third idea, okay, which Davis introduces while interpreting Powell. That is about the local and temporary base level. So as much as, let's say, when we are using lakes as a local base level, we can take this example of Jhelum River. Jhelum River starts from Verinag Spring. Then from there, Jhelum River flows into Wuller Lake. And then from Wuller Lake, there is its outflow. So between Verinag Spring and Wuller Lake, the Wuller Lake is going to act as a local base level. So these are the three parts of interpretation by Davis, okay, when he was interpreting what Powell meant to say when he was describing the concept of base level. But now there are major questions on these interpretations. The basic question, first of all, let's take it one by one. The first question is this one. That is about the grand base level. And second is about the local and temporary base level. These are the two basic questions arising from this particular interpretation. First one, if we see, that is the grand base level or the sea level. The question itself was, this base level is going to be interestingly, whether it is going to be a plane or whether it is going to be a plane. A plane is a featureless surface. Okay, plane can be a horizontal plane. So in this case, as Johnson argues about it, so Johnson was a very staunch supporter of this concept of grand base level, where Johnson says that while explaining the grand base level, I would explain it to be something like this, and the sea level. Johnson says that from here, the sea level, the plane, P-L-A-N-E, the plane is going to extend into the continents. And so for him, this plane is going to look something like this. And so this should be called as the grand base level. So this is where he uses the idea of it to be a plane. Okay, a plane which would be going into the continents, of course, imaginary plane. Okay, but this would be determining the base level, the ultimate or the grand base level. Now, a problem with this whole idea of the grand base level is we can say that, okay, the rivers which are near the coast, for them, this base level can work. But for the rivers which are far inland, very far away from the sea, for them, this base level, which is so far away from the sea, okay, this is not going to work. That is one argument against. Second, apart from that, has been said that if we even assume this to be a plane, okay, which is extending into the continents, and the rivers eroding with the ultimate level to be this level, effectively, what should be the result? The result would be all the continental mass which is there, which it has to be brought down, eroded, and brought down to this particular level. Yes, which later has been envisaged as the idea of penny plane. So a plane which is a result of all the erosion. But the problem is erosion of all this mass to the level of the sea level. It will require very long period of stability. But given the diastrophic forces operating on the earth, the continental masses cannot have so long stability that it remains stable. In any case, even slightest movement of the continent is going to change the base level, is going to change this plane. And so river will have to adjust to the new levels. Earlier, you were told that maximum erosion is this only. Now you have taken a plane over here. So first the river was adjusting everything based on this. Now you bring it to here, say now you can erode up to here. So that's the additional work that river has to do. It has to again readjust itself. But yet again at this level also it is not going to remain forever. Suppose sea level has come up. So now again the river will have to adjust it. So river will have to continuously adjust to these base levels. And so there is no case that the crustal stability can be for so long for this to act at this grand level. And if it cannot act at this grand level, there is no meaning and practical application of using the grand base level. I can use the concept of grand base level only when I can assume that everything would be reduced to this particular plane. But when I know it is not going to happen, when the crustal stability is not given for this long a period, there's no use of or the practical application of this concept at all. That's the first idea. So this is the first problem over here with respect to this question about the grand base level. That is its significance, practical significance. What is its utility? Then now comes the second question, that is local and temporary base level. Now, local and temporary base level question now that arises out of what Powell described as base level is whether Powell was talking about temporary and local base level or temporary or local base level. This is now the question. Because if he is talking about, or if he mean to say temporary and local base level, then he is telling us about three types of base level. What would be those types of base level? First, that is the grand base level. Second, that is the temporary base level. And the third, that is local base level. So in that scenario, the temporary and local base level would be different. But if he was trying to say temporary or local base level, it means he is only telling us how many types of base levels? Two types of base level. One becomes your grand base level and second becomes your temporary or local base level. You can call it temporary, you can call it local. They are one and the same. So this is one particular problem with respect to interpretation now. So in this case, what has been argued first of all by Davis. Okay, Davis, who interpreted Powell, now goes on further to identify two types of base levels. That's it. Okay, although while interpreting, he also used the word and. But later, while in explanation, he says that Powell meant only two types of base level. Okay, first, that is the grand base level or ultimate or permanent base level. And second, which is a temporary or local base level. So this is the argument of Davis. And Davis says they are one and the same. So one and the same, which is whatever are the local base levels, he says they are temporary in nature. So they are temporary in nature and therefore eventually they are going to be destroyed. So every local base level is a temporary base level, and so eventually it is going to be destroyed. On the other hand, another geographer, that is Mallet. So first, let's say Davis. Davis talks about two types of base level. Whereas Mallet argues that there are indeed three types of base level. Okay, Mallet says that there are three types of base level, and these types would come from the same. That is, you will have a permanent base level, a grand base level, that is the sea level. So let's say there is this grand base level. Then you have a local base level. And then you have a temporary base level. This is the argument of Mallet. Now, how to integrate this idea? Because definitely the problem over here is where in the statements of Powell, it was not very clear. Okay, and he used both for the example of local and temporary base level. Two examples he used. What were the two examples directly used by Powell? Where the lakes and the hard rocks. So hard rock, a dike intrusion I have showed you, and apart from that, a lake, how it acts as a local base level or temporary base level for that matter. So in this case, what can be seen is how to integrate these ideas. Now, integrating the idea, the primary case is out of all these three base levels, okay, the maximum utility rather would be that of local and temporary base level. Okay, grand base level has a very limited utility. That's the first thing. Okay, but both of them agree on this fact that yes, grand base level do exist. Okay, but it would be applicable to something which is near the coast. But the rivers which are far away from the coast, which are inland, for them, these two types of base levels are more relevant. Now, in this case, the idea is about gradation. So when we say gradation of a river, a graded river stream is a state of equilibrium between erosion and deposition. That is where erosion and deposition both are taking place. Okay, but there exists an equilibrium between them. And once equilibrium has been established, we can see that the long profile of the river, okay, or the slope along which the river is flowing becomes more or less similar. The slope or the gradient, because now it is going to equally cut and equally deposit. At one place cutting, at one place deposition for sure. Okay, but it maintains the gradient. So that becomes the graded river. So what can be said now in this case, I'm trying to integrate both the ideas with respect to local or temporary base level. And so in this case, first thing, for any valley, the local base level would be what base level? For any valley, the local base level would be another valley to which it is a tributary. There is one river flowing. This river is flowing into another river. So when this river is flowing into another river, what I can see over here is, let's say there is this valley over here. So we have this valley. So there is this one valley. Apart from that, what I find over here in this case, there is this principal river flowing over here, let's say principal stream flowing through here. And then in addition to that, I have a valley which is a tributary valley. So a tributary valley, let's say, now develops over here. In this pattern, a tributary valley develops. So there is this tributary flowing into this river. Now what we are trying to say is this river cutting its valley would be cutting a valley which would now look something like, when it would be cutting it, it will cut it like this. So there would be cutting like this happening. Okay, so you can see this cutting happening over here. Now, as this cutting happening, it can go on cutting it, it can go on cutting it. But the ultimate level of its cutting should become what? The base level should become this. And so even when this river goes on cutting it, and so the valley goes on becoming like this, the valley goes on becoming like this, there is no case where this valley would be able to cut below this level. Okay, so first thing, that for a valley, the base level would be another valley to which it is a tributary. That's the first scenario. Now, whether it would be called, it should be called as local or temporary base level. That's the foremost question for us now. So in this case, let's take this example where the river is flowing up to here. And now I'm assuming that there is a lake over here into which the river is flowing. And from here, the river flows again and goes into the sea. So this becomes your grand base level. The idea is for this, as of now, let's call it a local base level. For this to be a permanent local base level, this base level below this, the river which is there, it should be graded to the sea. Because if this is graded to the sea, this is going to remain here only. Yes. And so in that case, this base level now is not going to change for this part. But just think, if this part is not graded to the sea, what is going to happen eventually? This is also going to be changed because the river is going to attain gradation. So if I'm saying in this case, it is not graded, what will happen? In this case, let's say the lake later becomes here. During the process of gradation, it has to achieve the equilibrium. For that, the location of this local base level is going to change, which means the base level, this was acting as a base level for this part. So we have two parts. Sea level was acting as a base level for which part? This part. This lake is acting as a base level for this part. This is what we mean by local base level. For this local base level to be permanent for this part, it has to remain fixed. But if it has to remain fixed, then this part of the river should be graded with respect to sea. So this is where if this local base level is graded to the sea, then it is not temporary, it is permanent. But if this local base level is not graded to the sea, then I should rather start calling it what type of base level? Temporary base level. Very nice. So plain and simple idea, if the river below the local base level, so river below local base level, first case, if graded to sea, then this local base level, one thing. Second, if not graded to sea, then in this case, I should start calling it as temporary base level, which eventually is going to change. And so it becomes a temporary base level. So this is how we solve the problem with respect to the questions that were raised, okay, on the interpretation by Davis, and later when Mallet questions it and contents it in terms of whether it should be local and temporary, or whether it should be local or temporary. So these are the two questions which were answered, and this becomes the concept related to the base level. Now in here, other examples, if you can see, there would be in the desert areas, okay, or in the interiors, continental interiors, there may be rivers which are never going to reach the sea. So these, the inland drainage system, okay, or there would be a number of rivers in the regions like Leh, Ladakh, okay, where the rivers would be coming down, but they are never going to reach the sea. So they end up in some local lakes. So in those cases, these local lakes themselves would become the permanent base level for the river. For the tributaries, already I have told you, for the tributaries, the principal river will act as a base level. And if the principal river is not graded, then that local base level would become temporary. But if the principal river is already graded, then I should not call it temporary. I should only use the word local base level. Okay, permanent we use generally for the sea level. Okay, so either I should use the term local base level or I should start calling it as temporary base level. So this is the principal idea of the base level. Okay, how Powell initially defined it or described it basically. That is, the base level is the maximum limit of the vertical down cutting by the river, and where he explained different things, which was interpreted by Davis under these three heads. And later the interpretations were questioned first of all with respect to grand base level, in which Johnson presented his idea. But the question was whether it is a plane or plane, where Johnson said it is a plane. But we have opposed this idea based on the stability, crustal stability timing, along with that for the rivers away from the sea or the coast. And second, local and temporary, which was integrated the idea, okay, by using the concept of gradation of the river. So base level of erosion.